Hello everyone, Golden Nova here. Darkwing Blast has finally been revealed, and that means it's time for another update to the Albaz storyline, and with it, a new archetype to flesh things out. These usually manifest as factions that are here to aid the heroes against the mounting forces of evil. The Sword Soul, Springans, Ice Jade, and Tri-Brigade have all been stalwart companions, but this time, it's the bad guys that are getting a boost. Introducing the Beasted, a theme that, despite its card pool being on the shallow side at time of recording, is already being heralded as the next big addition to Dragon Link decks. It's always nice to see a lore theme take center stage in the competitive meta. We've come a long way since the Hidden Arsenal days after all, but for this, I'm gonna make an exception. Seriously, did we need even more options for the pile that never seems to run out of gas? But personal beefs aside, we have a lot to cover on this episode of the Albaz storyline Season 3, because as bleak as things looked last time, well, don't expect them to get any better here. If you're not caught up on the story so far, I highly recommend you pause the video and follow the link in the top right to my previous episode, as it is the most concise collection of information on the topic so far, including information from the valuable books, which are official Yu-Gi-Oh! Publications that shed light on what's going on. So, if you're ready to go, let's see what Aluber brought for show and tell, discuss how they fit into the competitive canon, then dive into what Darkwing Blast's lore has in store for us. It's time to best the competition with Beasted. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our Duel Runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. We've also got our Discord, where this thing exists. I also have a Twitch where you can join me for viewer duels, progression polls pulls, and chaos draft pulls for the foreseeable future. And don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So what's the deal with Beasted? Well, it's got two different segments, one made of level 6 Dark Dragons with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. I'm already flipping out over the lore implications, and one more of light dragons that are much more varied. So let's start with those dark dragons. Of note, they have another similarity. Each of them can target a light or dark monster in either grave, and on resolution, banish it, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. Normally, this is an ignition effect, but it becomes a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. A condition that, most decks tend to fulfill by nature of how the game is played. So in essence, these are quick effects, but get a little slower if your opponent has an open board. First up is Beasted Druid Worm. If this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can target one of your opponent's special summoned monsters and send it to the grave. So it's a DD Crow that hits a special summoned monster if your opponent lashes out at it. Or if you use it as some kind of material for a summon, because this does not miss timing, and it does not care how it gets sent from the field to the grave. Shame that this means you can't also fold this into Beatrice and get that effect, but let's be real, you're probably just gonna make Beatrice anyway. Having Foolish Burial in your extra deck is too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I've gotta hand it to him. If this card can turn into a dragon, it must have a ton of levels in Druid. Beasted Magnamut's effect triggers if special summoned, adding a dragon monster from your deck or grave to your hand during the end phase of this turn, except a copy of itself. That means every other dragon is fair game, so you can start to see why the Link variant is having a field day with this. On the one hand, I'm glad the search isn't immediate, but on the other, this firmly cements this as a strong going second theme. If your opponent drops a light or dark monster into their grave, then anytime they put a monster on board, you can snap up that little chaos monster, trigger the delayed search, and then you'll have any dragon at your disposal on the draw, which is kinda ridiculous. This makes it a little less useful when you're in the middle of a game and need an answer or combo piece immediately, but even then, because it's a delayed trigger, you can immediately leverage this card into other plays and not even worry about it. Well, I mean, I guess you should worry about it enough to actually remember to resolve the search during the end phase. Magnamut works slightly differently than Skarm, but when you miss it, it feels bad in exactly the same way. Beasted Saronir's effect triggers when sent to the grave from anywhere, even as Xyz material, and sends a beasted monster, except a copy of itself, or a branded spell or trap card from your deck to the grave. This is extraordinary for this theme because not only does sending our Dark Beasted give us fuel for our summons if our opponent isn't playing lights or darks, our light monsters actually can summon themselves from the grave, so it's kind of like having another search, and sending the branded cards isn't too bad either. While you won't be able to trigger the resetting effect of Branded in White, Bond, Judgment, or Screams, you can reset any of them to the field with Despian Tragedy, use Swords and Retribution's grave effects, protect a fusion with Opening, get High Spirits back using its own effect, and something else we can do that I'll be mentioning later. Suffice it to say, like most Foolish Burial effects, it turns out being able to drop a card from your deck into the grave is pretty good. But that's no surprise, because these evildoers only take the beast of the beast. But, if you'd believe it, we've yet to scratch the surface of this theme's true power. It's time for the Light Beasteds, starting with the Beasted Lubellion, a level 8 monster with 2500 attack and 3000 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand or grave by tributing a level 6 or higher Dark Dragon monster, but you can only special summon this card once per turn this way. You can send this card from your hand to the grave to add a Beasted monster from your deck to your hand, so even though this card doesn't work very well without the rest of the theme, it has a way to get to the rest of your theme. And during your main phase, you can place a branded continuous spell or trap card from your deck face up on your field. Now, we already have a few of those, but they tend to be on the situational side. But with this Lubellion being able to search them out and immediately deploy them, we might see a bit more in circulation, especially with how easy it is to summon Lubellion, who's turning into quite the hellion. The Beasted Albalos is a level 12 monster with 3500 attack and defense that also can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from the hand or grave by tributing 2 Beasted monsters. So not only does this take more investment to summon than Beasted Lubellion, you need to tribute specifically Beasted monsters, not generic big dark dragons. While you control this card summoned this way, you negate the effects of all Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters on the field. And if this card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can banish all face-down cards from each player's extra deck face-up until your opponent's end phase. The Dogmatica Nexus and its subsequent evolutions have always been a bit too much effort to use effectively, and I feel like Albalos is in the same category. Since the negation is reciprocal, this doesn't play very well with any extra deck cards you want to be playing. And while the ability to lock out your opponent's extra deck by banishing it all seems pretty nifty, especially because you'll get perfect knowledge of what they have, Albalos has to leave the field by an opponent's effect to work, so your opponent has to walk into it before you get any value. Now, because this can live in your grave until you find a good time for it, I wouldn't be surprised to see it being played as a fun of, especially with that stat line, but for now, I'm at an elbow loss for words. Okay, now we'll cover our spells and traps, both of which are continuous, and our branded cards, so they work with the Beasted Lubellion's effect. First is Rebranded, a continuous spell that triggers if any number of light and or dark monsters are banished. You can target one of those monsters, place it on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, draw a card. That's right, whenever you use a Beasted's effect to special summon itself, you can potentially get a draw. If you banish your own card, then it's a no-brainer, but if you banish an opponent's monster, it might be a bit more of a tough decision. But putting a card on the bottom of the deck is usually about as good as banishing it, especially if a draw is on the line. And once per turn, if your opponent normal or special summons any number of monsters, you can target a Beasted monster in your grave and special summon it, and you can only use this effect once per chain. That's an odd restriction since it already says you can only use it once per turn, but this is in the case of you having multiple rebrandeds, because it's a soft once per turn. You will be able to trigger multiple of these effects across different copies, but not on the same chain. However, the draw is a hard once per turn, so no multi-drawing off that. But with all the technical stuff out of the way, how is the card? Pretty neat. Even if you don't play Beasted, if your deck banishes a lot of light and or dark monsters, this can recycle them while keeping your resources up. And if you are playing Beasted, you can trigger another Magnamud effect, or set up your other 2 dark ones since you can't summon the light ones using this effect. So it's good to see that Despia's rebranding is going well. Branded Beast is a continuous trap card, and once per turn during any main phase, if you control a Beasted monster, you contribute a dragon monster, then target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. Ah, so we get removal on top of everything else. Amazing. and during the end phase you can target a branded continuous spell or trap in your grave and place it face up on your field. So this is like another version of the Beasted Lubellions effect, except this gets cards out of the grave and not the deck, and you get quick effect removal on top of it. And if you don't want to give up any of your Beasted for whatever reason, as long as you have one, you can just tribute an off-theme dragon, which I'm sure Heretics are just going to love. Also, is it just me, or would Branded Beast be like the sickest name for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Metal band that sang about lore? Gonna have to put some feelers out. I may not have played an instrument, but I have explained Symphonic Warriors, so it shouldn't be that different. So that's all the Beasted cards, but what do we do with them? Well, the deck lacks a really strong win condition, outside of summoning a bunch of pretty strong attack statted monsters, but you need more than that in today's meta to turn the corner. So, because you can search out a majority of these cards and their engine is relatively compact, this is going to be splashed in other decks, namely Dragon Link. I mean, it's hard to deny. You could play this in Chaos decks to throw material onto the board, kinda like with the Wyverburster Collapse Serpent loop, but it is severely tied with Dragon synergies. Like, remember how I said earlier that it's really easy to make Beatrice with these to set up grave effects? Well, you can also make Hieratic Dragon King of Atum, which means easy Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon access. Their levels also mean they work splendidly with level 2 and 4 tuners, specifically level 4s, because Rocket Tracer is only a quick launch away, though nothing is stopping you from also playing level 2 Psychic tuners and using Emergency Teleport. Though, given recent events, I don't think this is going to be evergreen information. Seriously, isn't it messed up that Quick Launch has been untouched since release, and we finally just got E-Tele to 3, and now Punk are making a really good case for putting Emergency Teleport back on the list. I am so upset. As for good synchros, the usual candidates apply here. Barone provides negation, Chaos Ruler helps you dig for more cards while setting up your grave, and Borreload Savage Dragon gives you even more negation while leveraging links like Dragoonity Knight Romulus and Striker Dragon. Your hand trap selection is also going to be very important. If you play a going second deck, having Effect Veiler or Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit will be integral, especially if they're not playing any lights or darks. That way you can fill your grave with the right attribute before you even have to draw, then you can summon your Beasted no problem. As for a silly tech pick, try Vsauce Starfrost. It is a light, so it fuels your summons, and since the Dark Dragon Beasted are not light warriors, they're easy targets to help summon Vsauce. And with a level 6 tuner, you can pair it with any Dark Beasted to make Ulta Maya Zolkin, or Geomath Mech Final Sigma, whichever you prefer. Besides, outside of any mechanical synergies, integrating 2 lore archetypes would be super sick. Okay, that's all the mechanical info I have about Beasted. Now it's time for the fun part. Well, the even more fun part, lore. But before we delve into what's going on with Albaz and the team, let's shift gears over to the Land of Iron and check in with Kit. Last we left off, the Argyro system that ran the Colosseum of the Therians erupted and the Splites made themselves known. And in the wake of their arrival, they launched a counterattack on Kit and the Springans. But it looks like the chaotic bout in Splite Smashers is coming to an end, as shown in the art of Splite Double Cross. It's a normal trap that has you targeting a monster on the field or in the grave and activating one of these effects. You either attach it to one of your rank 2 monsters as material, or if your opponent controls it, place it in a zone your link 2 monster points to and take control of it, or if it's in the grave, special summon it to your zone your link 2 monster points to. Now, the function of this card feels at odds with what the art is showing. Splites love making Link and rank 2s more than any other theme, and this feels like it's taking cards to act as servants, fuel, or extensions of themselves. But the artwork is showing Therian's Regulus and Captain Sargus absolutely bodying Gigantic Splite. So maybe the effect is more about how the Splites operate in general, and not what's actually going on here. I'd also like to point out that the name Double Cross seems to have a double meaning, as the Therians are turning their back on the Splites, but also Regulus and Sargus are performing a double lariat. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! And notably, it appears that Regulus is back to their old self after their stint as a regular. I thought Sargus might have punched Regulus's jaw right off, but it feels like that might not necessarily have been the case, and was just like that because of the possession. But how in the world was Regulus freed? Well, I think Splite Sprind might hold the answers to that. It's a Link 2 Fire Thunder Link monster with 1400 attack, requiring 2 monsters as material, including a level, rank, or Link 2 monster. If this card is Link summoned, you can send a level 2 monster from your deck to the grave, and if any number of other monsters are special summoned while this card is on the field, you can detach a material from one of your monsters, then target a monster on the field and return it to the hand. But this card cannot be used as link material the turn it's link summoned, and you can only use one effect per turn, and only once per turn. Which ain't too terrible, since you'll likely be sending a monster from your deck to the grave on your turn to set up your plays, while you try to bounce your opponent's monsters on their turn. Though I should note that this can trigger on anyone's special summons, including your own, and you don't have to bounce what was summoned, you can hit anything. But hey, it does give you something to do with the spare material on Gigantic Splight. As for what in the heck is going on here, it looks like Kit has turned her outfit from her Springans card into some kind of containment unit. You can see the canisters have a red and blue energy in them, which looks very much like the Splites. And since we're fairly certain they like possessing machines, it seems Kit has turned their greatest strength into their newest weakness. A shell they can't leave from that has very little combat functionality, unless they're somehow proficient with slapping things with those coat arms. Also, if you check the bottom, you can see a small chain of holes, which does confirm that this is the contraption Kit was wearing in Springans' kit. Now, this doesn't show them being siphoned out of Regulus. The Art of Monster cards rarely does show events happening, but since Regulus appears to be back to normal, I have to assume that this is how it was done. Also, red and blue make purple, and Irregular's lightning looked like a very pale purple. Another interesting piece of info is that this is Splite Sprind, which is a name that we've seen before. The Iron Dash Dragon, the black sheep of the Albaz fusions. I'm not fully sure what this means at the moment. Maybe it's a hint about how Sprind was initially built by Kit as well, that it's a vessel to hold Springans and Splites, and hopefully future entries will flesh this out. Now, unfortunately, there isn't much more to go on in this set for them, but funnily enough, that's kind of to be expected. I've talked previously about Yu-Gi-Oh's third chapter problem, where very little happens that's worth talking about. Now, this is the second core set out of this 4-set cycle, but the funny thing is that the Kit arc started in Dimension Force, which would make this the third chapter for Kit's story specifically. Next set, I predict that with the Splites having been defeated, Kit will finally discover the secrets of sealing the Stigmata, which will come in handy during Albaz's last stand. And that's as good a segue as ever to talk about the Albaz story proper. To start, how do the Beasted factor into all of this? Well, considering their connection with the branded cards, it's safe to say they're aligned with Aluber, especially since one of their big bosses is a new form of Lubellion. But last we checked, Lubellion had become 50% of Alba Lenatus, so what gives? Well, remember how Albaz escaped / was ejected from Lenatus' central core? And how that core had 4 interlocking circles, each with their own symbol? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if the rupturing of Lenatus' central core caused it to split into several forms, 4 to be precise. And we have a lot of evidence to support this. Take a look at the flavor text for Aluber's token, a thing separated from the abyss, and Alba Lenatus is the Abyss Dragon. So, if this is anything like how Aluber and Albaz were made, this wouldn't be the first time a creature would be born from the separation of a united super being. It's not even the first time this would have happened in Yu-Gi-Oh lore in its entirety. Even Lenatus' fusion material is evidence of this, as it's fallen of Albaz and 1 or more dragons, but per the story, it should only be Albaz and a other dragon, Lubellion. But if it were multiple dragons, these could be them, trapped either inside Aluber or Albaz, and my money is on Albaz. And that's because each of the Beasted look very familiar. Not totally, but they have certain characteristics that call back to Albaz's enhanced dragon forms. For instance, Druid Worm has the same kind of traditional 4-legged dragon anatomy as Albion, and Saronir has the kind of muscular and beast-like structure of Brigrand. This only leaves Titaniclad to be paired with Magnamut, but that doesn't feel right. The posing is all wrong. So instead, while it's a little unorthodox, Magnamut could be the aspect of Masquerade, the Crimson Gleam Dragon. Their posing is certainly closer than that of Titaniclad's, and while I feel the pose is also similar to Mirror Jade, that form was made as a result of Sword Soul and Ice Jade power, and doesn't fit the 2500 attack, 2000 defense pattern. Now, Lubellion is likely the 4th of this set, but it's so different from the others in terms of level and attribute that it's not a solid connection. This could leave the door open for a 4th Dark Beasted that looks like Titaniclad, but it's almost too perfect right now. We have 3 demonic dragons that are level 6, 666, the number of the Beasted. They can't possibly mess that up. Alba Loss, on the other hand, is pretty clearly the latest form of Dogmatica Nexus, previously Despia Priscinian. Lubellion seems to have plugged themselves in, Gurren Lagann style, changing its properties. There isn't much to add to this, but if our knowledge of how the brands work is correct and not subject to the whims of an unreliable narrator, this is the source of the brands, having been distributed by Maximus. So it being used as a Luber super weapon is very worrying. But I'm sure it wasn't just used as a blunt force weapon, but also to bring a lost lamb back into the fold. Last episode, we saw Ecclesia in Quem's clutches, mourning the death of Fleur, the closest thing Ecclesia had to a sister. And in this state of sorrow and grief, it appears Ecclesia has become Red Cartesia the Virtuous. They're a level 4 light spellcaster tuner monster with 1500 attack and defense, and if you have Fallen of Albaz on your field or in your grave, you can special summon this card from your hand. And as a quick effect during any main phase, you can fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your field or hand as material. And during the end phase, if any number of fusion monsters were sent to your grave this turn, you can add this card from your grave to your hand. Now, much discussion has been made about whether this is Ecclesia or not, or if this is someone else, perhaps a new character, or a form of Quem. But, to the non-believers, I'm very sorry, this is Ecclesia. The stat line is the same, they recycle under the same conditions, and they have a quick effect that summons a monster. Now, one could argue that this is based on similar training. If this is another saint like Ecclesia, it makes sense they have a similar skill set. So we'll need some evidence that is unmistakably Ecclesian, and we have such proof in the form of Rebranded. While the camera is pulled in much closer, this looks very reminiscent of Branded Bond. It even has the beast it associated with Albion. So, combined with the name of the card, this could be a part of the process that turns Ecclesia into Cartesia. Sorry folks, but this is our favorite virtuous hammer-wielding cleric, having been taken over by the power of Despia. And speaking of transformations, it appears a Luber has traded out the chain of holes emanating from their head for a pair of horns that resemble the Lubellian form. Since the red gems are present, I think it's safe to say that a Luber has the capability to shift between this form and Lubellian. This is in stark contrast to Albion, who I still maintain was stuck in their shrouded form after the transformation, since we didn't see Albaz in their humanoid form until after the split with Alba Lenatus. Some may take this art as proof that Albaz could always transform, but I think the opposite. If Albaz was able to do so, they would have shown it at least once, like how they're doing with a Luber. The exact reason for this is unknown, but I feel like it has something to do with the fact that a Luber now controls both the red and white stigmata, granting them an unprecedented amount of control over their power. This leads us to the next battleground, and presumably the last clash between Albaz and a Luber, the final battle at Golgonda, a continuous spell whose name becomes Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda while on the field or in the grave. Once per turn, if any number of cards you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck to the grave instead. An outstanding effect since it protects all of your cards, not just on-theme ones. And during each end phase, if you have Fallen of Albaz on your field or in your grave, you can special summon a Springans monster from your hand or deck. This can summon Rocky to recycle your field spell, which in turn can recycle your Gold Golgondas in grave, including this card. And it looks like a Luber has pulled out all of the stops, not only bringing Alba Lost to bear, but the entire theater of the Branded as well. It's a daunting task, but in the face of such insurmountable odds, hope still remains, because Albaz does not stand alone. Tri-Brigade Last Stand is a continuous spell, and if any number of Tri-type monsters are special summoned to your field, you can target a banished Tri-Brigade monster and add it to your hand. And after damage calculation, if your Tri-Brigade monster battled an opponent's monster, you can return that opponent's monster to the hand. You can only use each effect once per turn, so it does not turn each of your Tri-Brigades into a Hyper Hammerhead, but it is non-targeting, non-destruction removal, so make the one you do have per turn count. And while the deck already has a way to recycle banished monsters in the form of Revolt, Last Stand actually puts the cards in your hand, where Fractal works best. Albaz appears to still only have the Ice Blade Dagger, but all the Tri-Brigades that have arrived are standing firm, their blue ribbons glowing brightly in the ominous desert landscape. How will this battle unfold? Unfortunately, that will have to wait until next time, because that's the end of our story, at least for now. Things have gone from bad to worse these past few sets, but maybe, just maybe, we'll see a new dawn break on this bleak abyss. However, I would like to end things on an interesting bit of trivia one of you shared with me recently. Did you know that there's another story about a dragon of red and a dragon of white dueling against each other to the death? It's a Welsh tale dating back hundreds of years, and while its cultural impact, or whatever lesson it was trying to teach, is lost on me, the winner of that deadly duel was the Red Dragon. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching this latest edition of the Albaz Lore series. If you enjoyed, hitting the like button and subscribing does a lot to help me out, and if you want to go the extra mile, share this video with your fellow Yu-Gi-Oh friends, or even people who aren't too into it. They might like the lore we have, after all. And if you'd like to get episodes like this early while helping to keep the lights on here, joining my Patreon is a great way to support me. It also gets you into the credits of each episode. And speaking of which, today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashling Waltz, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Avagule, Adams Ajdel, Avi Chali, Cryptic Gamer, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Meteornus, Mighty Action X, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, The Fresh Prince of Con-Air, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chazghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry, the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777 and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to hear the rest of the Albaz lore, check out this playlist that has the rest of the story at large. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi-Tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.